Welcome back, fellow coders, to section 2 of this 12-section offering on a deep dive into the Dart programming language. In this section, we are going to cover variables, data types, comments, casting or type conversion, printing, and we will find out about using the final and const keywords to define variables. Let's jump right in. If you watched closely during section 1, you know that we've used the print statement before. So the print statement prints a string representation of the object to the console. It's from the Dart core library. The Dart core library contains Dart built-in types, collections, and other core functionality. This library is one that is imported automatically. We don't need a special import statement to make use of this functionality at the top of our module. It's a built-in function that prints to the console. And so here is an example. Again, we are in our main function. And in the body of the function is what gets executed, and we see print yo Dart. So whatever we place in quotes inside the parens of this print function gets printed out to our console as seen here. We can use double quotes, we can use single quotes. We have to end every statement in Dart with a semicolon, as we covered in the previous class. What are variables? Variables store a reference to an object. Also implied in this word, variables can change through the course of your program. Well, sometimes they can change. When we use the var keyword to define them, they can change. Here's an example. Var, then first underscore name equals, in quotes, Carol. So let's go through it. Var is a keyword, and it's one of the ways we tell Dart we are declaring or defining a variable. First name is the variable name. Right now in our program, whenever we reference first name, its value will be equal to Carol, because Carol is what we are defining on the right side of the equal sign. So Carol is the value we have assigned to the variable first name. We could have chosen anything, first name, name, fname, anything. It's user defined and it's entirely up to us, but I suggest you choose wisely so you'd understand what that variable represents in your code. This will help you and other coders who might have to pick up your code or understand your code or troubleshoot your code. We'll talk a bit here about changing the value of our variables and a little string interpolation just to round it off. So in this code, I print out the variable name 2 different times, but in between those 2 printings, I change the value. Take note of how we reference a variable in our print function by using the $sign in front of the variable name within the parentheses. This is called string interpolation. If I were to construct an expression similar to name dot to uppercase or to lowercase or what have you, I would have to put it within curly braces, just like you see down here. So what have we learned? We've learned that we are able to change the value of a variable if we define it using var. There's other ways we can do it too, and we'll get to those. Let's talk a bit about types. This is not a topic specific to just the Dart programming language. In fact, every programming language has the concept of a data type. A type is an attribute of data which tells the program how the data is going to be used. For example, a string data type may be used to represent the title of a page, while an integer data type may be used to add numbers together. This is important because the type defines what you can do with that particular piece of data, the meaning of the data, and the ways the values can be stored. The Dart data types are as follows. We have numbers, strings, Booleans, lists, sets, maps, runes, and symbols. And we are going to explore just about every one of these in detail through the rest of this course. So you look at this statement, var first underscore name equals Carol. How does Dart know what data type this represents? Enter something known as type inference. The type of the first name variable is inferred to be a string by Dart. Anytime we use var to define a variable, we are letting Dart infer the type we are defining. How does this work? The Dart analyzer employs this thing called type inference. That means it can infer types for fields, methods, local variables, and most generic type arguments. When the analyzer doesn't have enough information to infer a specific type, it uses the dynamic type in those instances. I did mention there are other ways to define a variable, and this is important because what winds up happening, if we don't understand all these different ways to do things in Dart, you might get to Flutter and see stuff and not understand where it comes from. Did the user define it? What is that? What are the differences? So that's why I'm trying to expose you to this. If the object isn't restricted to a single type we said on the previous slide, we can use what's known as the dynamic type, and it would look like this. Dynamic first name equals Carol. We could explicitly declare the type like this. Carol is a string. We can use string first underscore name equals Carol. All of these ways work just fine. The string data type is a sequence of UTF-16 code units. You can use either single quotes or double quotes to create a string. A string is a sequence of characters of almost any kind. So you see on the left-hand side, I have var s1 equals hi, var s2 equals hello, uppercase, lowercase, all perfectly permissible. I print them out using the $ that we talked about, string interpolation. They print on the bottom as you would expect, hi and hello. On the right-hand side, you see I have mixed characters in there. Uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, special characters, all perfectly permissible. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about special consideration and when we need to escape characters. So if you want to use certain characters in your Dart strings that have special purpose or meaning, like a backslash, like single quotes, a $, something that is very specific in Dart, you must do what is called escaping them. If we don't, Dart has no idea what your intention is. So let me point this out. You see on the left-hand side var s1, variable s1. In the middle of that, we have a backslash in front of a $. What that tells Dart is I want a literal $, in the middle of this string. That's escaping the $, with a backslash. If you want to use the $, that's a special character, that's a reserved character for Dart. As we know, we use it in string interpolation. You have to use the backslash in front of it. Once you use the backslash in front of it, it becomes the literal $, instead of the meaning that we use when we execute string interpolation. So if you are going to use a special character, single quotes, double quotes, $, backslash, you must escape it. And all that means is put another backslash right before that special character. When we concatenate something together, we link things together in a chain or a series. So all programming languages that I'm aware of have the ability to do that. So notice the syntax used for this print statement on the left-hand side here. Both variables are within curly brackets. This is because this is a statement. I'm adding one thing to another, so I need the curly brackets to encapsulate the statement. On the right-hand side, notice the syntax used for this print statement where each variable has its own $, with a space in between that is accounted for during the printout. This is not a statement. These are two variables, and I don't need the curly braces for this. Nevertheless, what this does with a string is add these two strings together. The first one is hi and bye has the preceding dash before it, and the second one is just hi and bye with a space. That's how we concatenate two strings together, adds them together, one right behind the other. You know, sometimes it can be downright annoying when you have a longer string, so you really want to be able to wrap that string onto multiple lines. So we have a multi-line string. There are 3 options for doing this. You can use triple single quotes, like I do in the first example with S1. You could use triple double quotes, like I do for S2. Or you can quote around different sections of a string, having them span over multiple lines. We've talked about the string data type. Now we'll talk about the number data type. There are 2 types of numbers in the Dart programming language, an int for integer and a double for a floating point number or a number with a decimal. So here for int age 45, your age is, and again, I use string interpolation there. That is an integer. 45 is an integer. Double height is a double. Notice the decimal point. So very easy to tell these apart. I preface the assignment or the definition with int for integer and double for double. Now let's explore a coding example using these numbers to really drive this home. So we're going to determine someone's age. We have in the body of our main function 3 variables, 3 integers in fact, current year, birth year, and your age. So the first 2 have the current year, which is 2020, and then the birth year of somebody born in 1920. Then your age just makes use of that, subtracting the birth year from the current year. We have a print statement using string interpolation on the your age variable, and it prints out your age is 100. Now we'll take a look at the Boolean data type, true or false. In computer science, the Boolean data type is a data type that has one of 2 possible values, usually denoted by true or false. This is intended to represent the 2 truth values of logic and Boolean algebra. It is named after George Boole, who first defined an algebraic system of logic in the mid-19th century. So on the left-hand side, option 1, we are explicitly setting one value to true and another to false using the bool dart data type. So instead of string, instead of int, we preface the name that we choose, in this case true 1 and false 1, with the bool data type. Option 2, setting any variable named yes in this particular case as a bool, will resolve to true. You would use a Boolean data type when you need a statement to resolve to being either true or false, like a switch, either on or off. Much more on this later when we get to conditional statements and flow control, because it really goes along with things like if statements. We can take different paths. Think of a data flow diagram, right? When you have that little sideways diamond to say, did we do this? Yes or no. It's the same type of thing. That's what flow control does, and we're going to get all into that. And what if you want to insert in your code something just for your benefit or the benefit of other coders that might have to pick up your code without letting it be known to the users of your code? Enter comments. In computer programming, comments are used to annotate your code. They are a tool for you as the original coder and any other coder who may have to maintain or understand your code. They're not visible to the end user. It's a very helpful tool that I sometimes underuse, and I'll tell you what happens. I'll never forget what I did here. You have some new sophisticated piece of code, and then you go back and you have to spend a half hour teasing it out to understand exactly what did I do, why did I do this. That really happens as code gets more complicated. So I advise you to use comments early and often. So Dart supports single line comments and multi-line comments, and also documentation comments. So let's look at them. Here, // is simply a simple comment, a one single line comment. Right below in the body of our main function, we have a / followed by an asterisk. Then we have several words over several lines, and then we close with just the opposite, asterisk, and then a /. That's an example of a multi-line comment. On the right-hand side, I give you an example how I might use a comment to help me understand what I expect as a return. This might be very intuitive for this example, but again, as code gets more complicated, this is an exceedingly helpful tool. So I have bool, yes, we know that will resolve to what? True. So this next line I say should resolve to false. Why? I have 50 is greater than 100. I print yes, and that should be false because 50 is not greater than 100. Sometimes when we're coding, we have the need to convert one data type, say a string, to an integer, or an integer into a string. When we change the data type of a value from one to another, this is known as type conversion or casting. Note right here, we use a runtime type property after variable name followed by a dot to tell us what the data type is for that variable. So in our main, we have var s1 equals 1, the number 1, but it's in quotes, so it's a string because it's in quotes. Then we print s1 and it tells us that it's a string. Then we establish var n1 equals int dot parse s1. So I'm going to parse this string into an integer. So once again, I make use of the runtime type property, and the second print statement resolves to an integer. That's how we would convert one data type into another. And wrapping this up, we're going to talk about the final and const keywords as different ways to declare variables. When would we use these? We would use these when we never need to change the values of variables that are defined. So final, then our variable name is first underscore name equals Carol, or const text underscore state underscore RI equals 0.07. So what is the difference between the two? Okay. Final is initialized only when it's accessed. So memory is allocated only when you use the value of first name. Const, on the other hand, while also being final, is a compile time constant. That means it's not initialized until your program is compiled and then memory is allocated. So whether you use this variable in your program or not, it will consume memory. Another difference is you can use final for an instance variable in a class. When we get to object-oriented programming, this is going to make more sense to you. But you can't use const. You instead could use static const, so you must use the static keyword first. So there's a little bit of a difference here in terms of how we would use this when we get to object-oriented programming. So those are the difference, but you would use these when you don't need the values to change. So notice we use them, we use final and const instead of var, right? Usually we do var first name equals Carol. That's how we started this class. It's final first name equals Carol, or const. Okay? My fine friends, thank you for making it all the way to the end. I hope you found this valuable. If you did, do a couple of things. Subscribe to the page, give me a like, leave a comment, and share this with somebody who might need it. We're trying to start a revolution here.